One thing I want to say is thank Donald for his credit given to the University of Georgia. What I do want to say is that we work very hard at the University of Georgia, but I also look out and see my colleagues from the industry, and without bullets in the terms of fungicides, insecticides, herbicides that the industry continues to develop over and over again and that you support, we couldn't get to where we are. So it's a partnership. It truly is, isn't it, Dickie? So what I'd like to say is also, if this was a NASCAR event, and the race ended right now and who was heading up and who was leading, what I would say is if the season ended right now, being winter season, and we were getting ready to plant, I want you to remember three things from what I do. All right? The first thing is this winter has been warmer than usual. That's a La Nina effect. Warmer than usual in the winter could affect thrips populations, and then maybe Dr. Adams can comment on that. We got to watch what's going to happen with spotted wilt. Past 2 years, low spotted wilt. This year, warm spring. Who knows what will happen? Second thing is we need cold killing temperatures to drive our nematode populations down. If it stays warm, let's look for nematode problems. The last thing is the difference between CBR, I'm going to talk a little bit about CBR, and white mold has an awful lot to do with what happens in April and May in your soil temperatures. And if it's warmer, look for less CBR and look for more white mold. The main reason for talking about white mold is that white mold is one of the most, if not the most important disease that each one of you all faces. No matter what you call it, white mold, stem rot, southern stem blight, it has a bunch of different names, but the bottom line is every grower in this room has to fight white mold to a greater or lesser degree. And no grower in this room will control white mold 100% no matter what you do. In the best of situations in a bad year, getting 60%, 70% control of white mold with your best fungicides and your best efforts may be all you can do. White mold is an important fungicide. Resistant varieties are rare. We've got some. Georgia 07W is a good example, but we need to do and continue to get more. Fungicides added the cost, but it's a good investment, an outstanding investment. Yield losses to white mold are much greater than for any other disease in peanuts. You can argue that controlling peanut leaf spot costs almost as much money as controlling soil-borne diseases. Okay? Almost as much money. But when you look at the yield losses associated with white mold, despite a fungicide program, it's much greater than any other disease. I'm going to be talking about white mold. Let's look at white mold from the inside out and how do we manage it. And with that, in my profession, we talk about the disease triangle. If you're going to have a white mold breakout in your field this year, and you will, the first thing you got to have is you got to have white mold. The second thing you got to have is a susceptible host, and that's your peanut plant. And the third thing is, as I mentioned earlier, it's your environment. Warmer, hotter temperatures drive white mold. And if we see that, we're going to have more white mold. Okay? All right. What I want to do, what I truly believe is the best way to show you why white mold is a special case for peanut growers is to compare it to another soil-borne disease. I won't ask for a show of hands, but if I did, I would say probably a third of you may have seen cylindrocladium black rot or CBR on your farm. Most of you have not. You don't want to see it. David Wagner spent time in area of the state, East or West Georgia, where we have a lot of CBR. If you're from East Georgia, you haven't seen as much. You don't want it. But what I want to do is compare two soil-borne diseases, cylindrocladium black rot or CBR and white mold, to show you why white mold is such a special disease. Both are serious diseases. Both will affect you. All right, set these next 4 or 5 slides up. The photographs on the left, top and bottom, will be of white mold. Photographs on the right-hand side will be of CBR. And this is just field shots, right and left. Let's see. Left will be white mold, right will be CBR. This is just showing you in this picture how these two diseases, driving by or simply walking through the field, can look very, very similar. Soil-borne diseases. White mold and cylindrocladium black rot cost growers a significant amount of worry and a significant amount of money in terms of lost yield every year. Okay? So they're similar in that situation. Next picture. What are the symptoms? Again, left is white mold, right is CBR. And superficially, they can look very similar. You see the white fungal growth gives it its name, obviously, in the left. You can see on the right you have fungal growth. In this case it happens to be red, but in the same parts of the plant, the crown of the plant. So superficially, these diseases can be very difficult to tell apart unless you're seeing some of the color differentiation. So again, CBR, white mold, soil-borne diseases, both cause significant damage. All right? Let's look at how they're spread. Okay? How are these two fungi or these two diseases spread? And the basic issue is, you can call them fungal seeds for lack of any better term, it's what we call sclerotia. You've seen these BBs with the white mold, these sclerotia. You can see them here in this picture. You can see the microsclerotia on the seeds. They look like cinnamon specks on these seeds. What happens is they fall into the soil and they survive over time. The way white mold, the way CBR survive in your field, this is preaching the choir, you know this, but what I want you to understand is they're similar because those survival structures, analogous to seeds, survive in the soil, and that's how they remain there, waiting for your next peanut crop or your next susceptible host. So again, white mold and CBR are similar in some ways. They're both soil-borne diseases. Leaf spot's going to attack your foliage. When you look at white mold, you look at CBR, you look at these pictures, they're attacking basically that same area of the plant, close to the soil. And why do they call them soil-borne? Because those survival structures and the fungus are growing in the soil. Okay, what's my point? Why talk about CBR? And to understand what makes white mold so important to every grower in this room, not just the ones who have CBR, is to understand how these two diseases are different. First difference, okay? I've talked about the importance of environment on white mold. It's even more important on CBR. If we have a hot and dry, or even just a hot springtime, planting time, guess what disease we're not going to have much of, David? We're not going to have much CBR. It is driven by cooler and wetter temperatures. And where CBR affects the crop and where the infection takes place is right down here in the roots. What about white mold? White mold likes warmer temperatures. Even if it's cool in the first part of the season, we got plenty of hot weather coming, and guess what? That white mold will jump up. And white mold needs oxygen. White mold needs the same thing we breathe, and white mold's going to be the biggest problem around the crown of the plant. What's the first take-home message there? As far as control, it's a lot easier, Keith, to get Proline or another fungicide right up here. Mike, to get a bound right up there, okay? What I can say is you have to get it down in the bottom. How do we manage it? Okay? If you came here wanting me to compare a Bound versus Proverse versus Quash versus Avito versus Proline, come to the county meetings for that kind of stuff. All right? What I'm talking about is the general trends in how we manage them. First thing is rotation. Rotate away from peanuts. Guess what? If you're growing conservation tillage peanuts, I applaud you for the effort. There's a lot of good reasons to do it, but the best way to reduce the inoculum buildup of white mold is to rotate away from peanuts and soybeans and susceptible crops and deep turn. Because in that top inch or so, those seeds, those fungal sclerotia from white mold can survive for years. You bury them, they're there for about a year. Okay, so deep turning helps. Plant a more resistant variety. Georgia 07W is not perfect, but in a white mold situation, it's a step in the right direction towards integrated pest management. Choose an appropriate fungicide program. Every grower in this room may consider using tebuconazole this year. Why? Why? It's cheap, and it's a good fungicide, okay? But don't decide that you're going to use tebuconazole because it's cheap. Decide what fungicide you're going to use because you know what the pressure is in your field, you know what you need to use. Because I will say that the newer fungicides we got coming out have efficacy towards white mold that surpasses what you can expect. That's tebuconazole, isn't that right? Buy fungicides at the appropriate window. Okay, we're usually talking about 60 days. 60 days and beyond is what's worked well for us. But what I will tell you is, as you're building a fungicide program, and you know that white mold can come in earlier in a warm year, and you know that you also have cheap applications of tebuconazole, consider maybe starting your fungicide program a little earlier. Keep your standard program, maybe start a little earlier with something like tebuconazole. Okay, apply fungicides at night or the early morning. Show you a little bit of data on that. Who would have thought? It makes perfect sense. I wish that I would have thought of it, but I didn't. The main problem in managing white mold is what? The biggest problem. In a Petri plate, we can control it all day. Why can't we control it in the field like we control leaf spot? I mean, I get excited about this. Why not? It's because you can't get to the target. All that foliage is in the way. You spray at nighttime, Dickie, and you've got a clear path down there. All right? Apply Proline early in the season. Okay? And that's something that's brand new. We're talking about that as well. Okay? First off, the breeding effort. Dr. Bill Branch is doing a lot of this effort. Dr. Barry Tillman's trying with this as well. Okay? Breeding efforts are underway to screen for resistance to white mold. The two newest varieties, which would be Georgia 09B, and this is out of our 2012 Peanut Risk Index. This is our risk to white mold. More points has less resistance, fewer points than purple, York, and Georgia 07W and black have more resistance. We got some new good varieties coming out, 09B and Flow Run 107. Okay? Good varieties, good yield potential, don't have any improved white mold. So we got to go with what we've got. If you're going to plant these good varieties, what do you need to make sure you have, Wayne? A good fungicide program. Okay? 1994, the game changed for white mold control. It flooded in Albany in 1994, I think. Right? 1995, the second, it was a 1-2 punch. Folicure came out in 1994, Abound came out in 1995, and the game's never been the same. And now you have these, in addition to tebuconazole, in addition to Abound, you have a whole host of other fungicides out there. The main thing I want to remind you is there are differences in these fungicides, but the basics in getting the best performance is rotation, rotation, rotation. Choose a resistant variety, and then regardless of what fungicide program you choose to use, because they all can perform well, make sure you stay on time. You want to stay ahead of the disease. Last topic. If you've got CBR in your field and you're not going to use Vapam, you need to use Proline and Furrow. Problem is, where do you need the fungicide for CBR control? Where does it attack? It attacks the roots. The amazing thing that happened is when we did the early emergency application, actually Tim Brenneman did this, is that in the absence of CBR, I thought it was a busted test, but in early emergency application, the peanut plants were between 1 and 2 weeks old, we saw season-long control of white mold. On the left is a Bravo alone program. On the right is an early emergency application of Proline followed by Bravo throughout the rest of the season. No more white mold control. Amazing. Okay? And what this causes us to rethink is that the impact of managing white mold does not start at 60 days in a year like 2010 or 2011. It starts 2 to 3 to 4 weeks after that plant's come up. 60 days is when we typically see the best results. But in years like 2010 and 2011, starting earlier is an opportunity. Young peanut plant, what's killing this young peanut plant is what, 2 to 3 weeks old? That's white mold killing it. So early season application will be very important. How do we do it? You band a full rate, 5.7 ounce broadcast rate over the row, early emergence. And the idea, here's non-treated. This is your percent white mold. Here's Bravo. Here's a 4-block Provost program. You can see the difference between Bravo and the Provost program. Here in light blue is the difference between a Provost with a Proline program, early emergence. This went out 3 weeks after emergence, or after planting. Difference between Provost and a 4-block Provost plus a Proline. Okay? I don't care what you follow the Proline with. I don't care that. What I'm telling you is the Proline early emergence is a factor that we need to continue to look at. Okay? When you look at yields, again, non-treated, this is the Bravo. Here's where we have the Proline by itself. Here's the Provost by itself. Here's the Proline plus the Provost. And what's the idea here? The whole idea here is getting early season control. Last couple slides. Okay? We can talk more about the application. But if you want to go early emergence, what's that mean? It means between 2 weeks after planting and maybe 5 weeks. In 2010, 2011, it was better to be 4 to 5 weeks after planting. In some years, it might be better 2 or 3 weeks. And continue to be a top priority for growers. Why? Because you have more losses in this disease than any other disease. We'll continue to evolve prescription fungicide programs to manage it effectively with low pressure or high pressure. And the biggest thing is we'll look for new fungicides, and we're going to continue, hopefully, to take great strides in the application.